Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. As always, thank you for joining me, and you can go to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information or to share any show ideas that you may have. So here we are, and we have one of our Help Situation Spotlight series shows. And of course, the Help Situation Spotlight series is where you, members of our community, share ideas, concerns, questions, issues, and do everything in my power to try to come up with some potential solution ideas and work through framework sets to try to, as always, help to ensure that we are not just meeting our goals, not just reaching our goals, but surpassing our goals. So here we are, and we have an interesting show topic. The show topic is, do smart gals and nice guys finish last? I am successful at work. Why am I single? Do smart gals and nice guys finish last? I am successful at work. Why am I single? And this is a show that was challenging to put together. Part of the reason is I typically try to be as versatile and open as possible with the show topics and content so that it's not restricted to one type of person, whether it's somebody from a certain part of the world or someone of a certain gender or age or anything else. And so initially I was working through this and I initially was looking at this and trying to create two different shows. So one show was going to be do smart gals finish last? I'm successful at work. Why am I single? And the other one was going to be do nice guys finish last? And as I worked through those, there's so many challenges. One, the whole concept of gender. Again, I fully understand can be either offensive or inappropriate depending on someone's personal perspective and understanding of these types of issues. Yet, there are historical patterns that took place in many cultures around the world that did impact those who were labeled female and those who were labeled male. And sort of the takeaway that I addressed or mentioned, that's all I could do, in the show notes was that historically, and I understand that the gender terms, again, may be inappropriate or offensive, and I'm not trying to explain why societies were structured the way they were. I'm just trying to assert that they were to some general degree in many parts of the world where men would go and utilize their resources and use those resources, display those resources to procure females to be their partner or mate or pair bond. And women would use their skills in terms of being nurturers and supporters, and then they would display their attractiveness to procure the best male provider they could. So it was sort of a trade, and I took some fascinating psychology and evolutionary psychology classes a couple of years ago for my most recent graduate degree that I thought were interesting, and trying to sort of work through from a very large historical lens why there were some of the gender patterns that have existed and why some of the current gender patterns exist. And again, I'm not certainly putting forward that I'm the expert and have the answer. All I'm saying is that there certainly have been patterns where those who were identified as such as females would trade their most desired resources, usually physical attractiveness, again, nurturing, supportive, the idea of a female by a man's side, or behind every successful man is a great woman. The idea there, of course, is that by the side or behind, and because women were not able in many societies for very long periods of time to be able themselves to individually go out and just have the professional or economic opportunities that men did. And that wasn't accidental. I mean, these were set by law in many instances and by custom in others for a multitude of reasons. I'm not getting into that, but what I am arguing is that it existed and it has a ramification today. And I've talked to so many people around the world, so this isn't at all a U.S.-based issue, but I've talked to people all over the world. So I've talked to people in South Africa, I've talked to people in India, I've talked to people in different parts of Europe, I've talked to people in Australia, I've talked to people in lots of different places where I've been working, speaking and doing educational programs, and men and women, all different types of ages, different types of backgrounds, have sort of shared this similar idea, the idea that they're single, so they're not in a coupled or romantic relationship that they want to be in. That's the first issue, right? That they're unhappy about that. I call them the unsatisfied singles. And the second part is that they would say something like, well, but I don't understand. I work hard. I'm a good person. I'm smart. I have, why is that not enough? Like, why does that success at work not translate into sort of some, I guess, ideal personal relationship, whether, again, romantic, companionship, whatever. And I've heard enough of this that, again, I struggled trying to create these shows, and it first went down the path of two different shows and then realized it's basically sort of one issue. And, again, gender is so fraught with issues. So I'm just saying that the traditional roles, and, again, not saying why, not saying whether they should have been, but they do have an impact on how people made decisions. And it wasn't that long ago, a generation or so ago, where whether or not somebody romantically or even, passionately cared for, lusted after, or loved somebody was not really the primary issue, right? I mean, there's so many cultures, it was economic, largely. So a lot of it I refer to, the traditional male was the provider. But there was also, though, in many instances, the females, usually family resources played a role, right? There was a dowry. And I said in the show notes that traditionally the women applied on either their family, usually the parent or, grandparents, so they had sort of a social or tribal or familial position of resources, which made them attractive, right, to other people who would come and want to be part of that environment. And then the other part would be if the female then herself didn't come from a background of those resources, but then would go out on her own, or through family and friends and other group affiliation, would go out and try to find the person with the most resources that they could then join up with. So it was a lot. This was such a largely economic issue. And I've done many programs and will continue to do many programs where we talk about the legal issues of marriage and all these ramifications in modern time, right? So in modern time, it doesn't matter necessarily how you got into one of these situations. If you legally marry someone and it doesn't work, then there are huge financial consequences. Just huge. I mean, people can face financial ruin sometimes when their relationship goes the way they didn't expect. So these economic, historical reasons still exist and still play a role. Today we're not talking about the legal part of it. Today I was talking about the issue where someone sort of emotionally or psychologically says, you know what, I don't understand. I've done the right thing. I finished a certain level of school or education. I have a certain amount of trade skills or professional service skills. I work. I'm a good person. I pay my bills. Why is that not enough? Like, why am I here and I don't have this sort of romantic, intimate partner that I feel I should? And again, I hear this from all these people all over the world. So let's sort of see what's the underpinning of this. My big picture macro argument, big picture, is that often in historical times, relationships in terms of pair bonds, and especially in terms of marriages, were based on other decisions, largely economic, that had nothing to do with how somebody felt about somebody. So we can even think back, that's not really far back in history, but certainly in most religious traditions and texts, you have a lot of stories where the conflict between someone wanting to follow their heart, so shall we say, and then there were other predetermined decisions by their society, their family, their group, their tribal group, that they needed to be with somebody else, right? And then even moving forward in more recent times, we look, in Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet, right? The whole thing is that people, their heart told them that they wanted to spend time and be in each other's company, but there were these, family issues and societal issues that conspired against them, and of course it ends in tragedy. So this whole sort of narrative, which is, again, throughout so many different periods of modern recorded human history, that do you follow my heart or I can't follow my heart, which is usually what that was the narrative of the whole thing, right? I wish I could, but I can't for whatever reason, right? Societal, tribal, religious, whatever. And so that was the whole thing. That's what made it so sad and horrible, right? Because love, where you genuinely, fondly want to be, care about, or interested in, excited around somebody, versus decisions that have to be made where you can't be with those people, right? They're the wrong family or the wrong tribe or the wrong class or the wrong religion or the wrong, color or whatever. I mean, so that's a fascinating framework. And of course, it's still the premise for so many modern, narratives and movies and books, the same thing, right? Like, oh, they really want to be together, but they can't. Oh, and you want them to be together. Well, they end up together. It's so tragic. They can't. They won't. Or maybe they did. They overcame the odds, but it was so horrible and stressful. Love conquers all. I mean, this is just a powerful human narrative. And so the question, though, is what do we do, right? What do we do in modern times as we continue to try to figure out what is going to be the best thing for us? And the frustration that people have is where they feel like, this is so unfair. Here I am doing everything in my power to do the right thing, to work hard, and I've succeeded at some level, and yet here I am without my person or my family or my romantic interest that I would like. Couple of things. One of the reasons I'm talking so much about, everything from evolutionary, hunter-gatherer arguments and societal structures through more modern recorded history and narratives is because this is not new, and that there are long-standing traditions and habits and maybe even, which is totally debatable, reasons why people have tended to make the decisions they do, and that ideally different types of people have been judged on different things. So certainly when you're younger, both genders, the idea of physical beauty is something that's come up throughout, again, all of our recorded history, and that's something that is lovely when we're young. And often there was, again, this trade, right, of sort of physical attributes for economic opportunity. That still occurs today. The people that I'm talking to who are stressed out and worried, and the reason why we're doing the show, are people who my understanding is the following. A, they are proud of the good decisions that they've made, and they have in terms of good outcomes, right? So they have the ability to have shelter, to feed themselves, and they have some sort of work that they do that is, in their mind, honorable, and they feel good about themselves. All of that's super awesome. The challenge, though, is they're saying, well, where's my sort of, other half, right? That sort of idea. And part of the reason why, let's look at it from the perspective. So let's say that somebody's a traditional male idea, that they went out and they worked hard and they feel like, oh, I'm providing for myself, and I'm certainly, would love to meet the right person, for me. And the challenge is that historically it was a little bit, I don't want to use the word easier, but the rules were more clear. If you went out and you were in the role, the gender, the tribal affiliation, whatever, where you went out and you were the providers, then the deal sort of was, hey, if I go out and I provide, right, I go out and I obtain more resources, then the consequence of that is I get to then pick, the mate I want, right, that'll look the way I want or have the right attributes or whatever. That's sort of the deal. The deal is I'm going to go out and I'm going to literally, whether it's going out and killing the game so that we can all eat, or more modern times, I'm commuting on the subway to the office. But I'm going to go out and I'm going to earn these things, and part of the reason I'm doing it is because I enjoy it and it's for my self-esteem and all this. I contribute to society. But the other part of it is that as a reward, I'm going to then be able to pick sort of the most desirable people that I would want to either mate with or be in a romantic relationship with, or a marriage in more modern times. That was the deal. And I think when people say, well, what's the deal? Do nice guys finish last? I think their argument is, well, I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to, right? I'm not somebody who's out hurting other people or some sort of engaging in a lot of criminal activity. I'm doing things that have integrity. But where's my reward? Like, I'm supposed to go out and do these things, and then I'm supposed to be rewarded with sort of this great, person who supports me and tells me how wonderful I am, and spends all their time making sure that I'm taken care of, and this sort of traditional female, behind every good man is a good woman, and I think there's real frustration, and I understand it, because if the expectation sort of culturally was you go do these things, and then the reward will be this super great, nurturing, emotional relationship that is very likely to last. We talk all around the world, right? We talk about increased divorces and the breakdown of families, and part of the reason I would argue, and a lot of the research says, is that because historically, if one group, let's just say females, one gender group, was actually excluded from opportunities. Like, they could not go out and apply for that job or purchase that land, either by law and or custom, then it meant that they really didn't have a lot of options economically, right? So they either needed to come from, literally just sort of be born into a powerful, resourceful family, or they needed to go out and try to do everything they could in their power to find somebody else that had resources and then be that person's partner, so that they could then, literally have the way, to eat and shelter based on what that person did. And they couldn't really go out on their own and get those things independently. Now, maybe they could go out and find another person that had more resources and sort of trade up, as, we'll say, right? So there was some person that had a certain level of resources, and then as time went by, they went out and found other people that had more resources, and then they sort of left the first person and moved to the second person because then they had even more things to eat and, bigger, a place to live. So that did happen, but they couldn't themselves just sort of go out and say, you know what, I'm tired of you, I'm going to go out on my own and just, get my own resources and my own place to live, because they couldn't go out and earn a living like that. So it also then put more pressure and more dependence on the parties. In many parts of the world, in the United States, for example, the majority of divorces in modern times are initiated by women, which I think is a fascinating statistic. The idea in historical times was, and I know I had talked to some of my, they're all passed away now, but my grandmothers and that sort of generation, even though my grandmothers were both college educated, which was an anomaly for their time, they married, and admitted, that, and both of them are married multiple times, that, a lot of who they married was dictated by expectations of family and society and class and all this type of thing, and obviously, since they were married more than once, then due to divorce, then things didn't necessarily work out. That it looked great on paper, in other words, like this person went to this university or has these resources or comes from this family, and then they in real life married and didn't particularly apparently find that was going to be their happiest relationship. And then like I'm saying, historically, many women, if not most, they didn't have really other options. You could try to marry somebody else, but you yourself aren't going to go out and get that big job or have that professional opportunity, because it didn't happen. And in some situations, it was legally prohibited. It absolutely wasn't going to happen. All right, so that made it a little bit more understandable. People wouldn't just jump up and say, I'm leaving or getting divorced. Now, many people might stay in relationships where they're unhappy or they're unfulfilled, especially now, of course, we have more civil rights and recognition of people of different gender identity, different sexual orientation, and so. But we understand that historically we had the same, diversity of sexual orientation and gender diversity. Those people just often had to have the same framework as everyone else. You just married, for these societal or economic reasons, and you might have been unhappy, just like maybe other people were unhappy for personality conflict or whatever. But, what did you do? What could you do about it? So the reality in more modern times is that when I ask what can people do, I ask in the show notes. In modern times, let's say there's a modern female, a smart gal, and they're their own provider. Where does that leave her? Where does it leave a potential mate? I asked, what about a modern male, right? A nice guy who is not able to provide, and I just use millions of dollars, right, at a very high level, what we would say in modern times. Where does it put you? And the challenge is that the rules have kind of changed, right? Before, historically, if I'm in the provider role, I go out and I provide at some level, then that's going to give me sort of a ranking level that I'll be able to go and sort of trade the hard work I've done and the resources I've accumulated for the most desirable, mates. The challenge, though, is in modern times, I still do the same thing. I go out and I work and I'm doing those things, but then I go look at the desirable mates, and they might say, I don't like your personality. We don't get along. Your sense of humor is weird. And it's not even that they're trading up to some other, mate with more resources. They are their own provider. In a weird way, they're their own mate, I guess. And it throws a wrench into the system, because it's sort of the reward for somebody going out and doing all this hard work and making all these sacrifices was that now I'm going to get this great mate, right? And they're going to, fulfill these unmet needs, whether, emotional and attention and everything. But now the person goes out and does all these things, and they go looking at the people that they would potentially find, desirable, and those people don't even care necessarily about all their hard work, because that person has their own thing. It's very difficult to lure someone with, let's say a vehicle, right, a really fancy car, when they have their own fancy car. It sort of ruins the whole trade, because they would have the argument to say, well, I'm not going to just be with you for that car. I already have, a comparable car. I'm fine. And for the woman, it means that, it's the same sort of challenge, slightly different, I think. If you were the person who before were, or was in the group or perceived to be in the group where you were prohibited from doing things, and the opportunities opened up, what you've seen in the last couple of decades is, right, that people just themselves go out and earn that and get that job and make the money and then get their own car and their own place. And then I hear from sort of that traditional female perspective all the time around the world. People say, well, I don't understand. I'm great at what I do, and I got my promotion, and, I don't understand. Like, why am I single? Again, the fact that you're single is not at all related to the job. It's the same sort of rough analysis that the person who's the provider. The person who's the provider is saying, look, I went and provided, now give me my awesome mate. And the challenge is that the person that they maybe historically would have just been able to go to and see and say, look, I have a place to live, I have a vehicle or whatever. That person could say, well, I have my own place to live, my own vehicle. So I'm not interested in that. That's not luring me into anything. And with the female who's saying, look, I'm great at my job, I'm successful, look at this, come on now, where's my person, my romantic or spouse or whatever, like, where are they? And it's the same problem. Okay, you're good at your job, but guess what? They are okay at theirs. So it's not going to, this sort of reliance on, oh, look at this thing that I do in my professional world, that should have some impact on this personal life. It doesn't. And in the show notes, I wrote it down. Work is not the same as a personal relationship. And part of the problem is that as there's more parity in power and opportunity, then what it does is it negates the power, sort of these, this sort of asymmetrical historical legacy. So before, if you had a group that could not go out and apply for the good job, it was just prohibited, then that limited the pool. And then if you were in the group that could do it, then you would have more opportunity then, right, to reap benefits of it because you have less competition. As you've opened up these historical barriers and lowered the entry opposition for people, then that means that then you're not going to be in this very small group of people that has the privilege and then sort of the reward for being able to have these positions of power and economic independence because other people have them. So if you're a female and you go out and you work and you feel good about yourself, that's awesome, right? But you can't then turn around and say, well, I don't understand why these wonderful traits and all these good things I've done don't relate to my wonderful ideal romantic partner because they have nothing to do with it. It's the same problem. You can't go out and say, well, look how great I am at my job and I have a nice place when the other person has a nice place too. And the flip side of this is some women will say, well, look, I'm working and I have a place and I have a vehicle, and yet there's a gentleman that asked me, if he wants, to date me, but he doesn't have a vehicle at all. I don't want to date him. He doesn't have resources at all like what I have. Now, part of that's not logical. You already have your own resources, so why does it matter what he has? The challenge, I think, is that we are just not being realistic or honest. If the rules, I hate that word but there's a lot of, stuff out in the media, right, the rules. If it used to be much more predictable that if you went out and you provided and then someone who didn't have resources would come and then sort of trade that for attention and nurturing and everything, and that's changed, then you have to accept that. And everybody has to. So what it means is your success at work is not going to be at all related to this romantic partner that you're looking for, unless you want to go ahead and do like a historical trade. So that if you have more resources, just go find somebody with less resources than you do who makes decisions based on that. And that's what you see, right? So you see this all in the media. It's constantly. It's not just the historical sort of books and narratives we talked about earlier in plays. The idea, right? So the wealthy woman, the wealthy man goes out and they have all the wealth, and then the young, usually attractive by whatever societal standards, person comes around them and sort of trades their youth and beauty, I guess, for access to the economic security. That happens all the time. And as you've seen these huge shifts in a lot of parts of the world where women are the first ever, the first political leader, the first business leader, the first leader in all these different parts of society, then you start to see that, right? You see women do what some historical men have done. We've seen it in royalty, right? Where royalty would go and, they literally would change a religion if they needed to be able to keep moving on to the next battles after they retired or somebody. Now, does that get anybody this sort of romantic modern idea of love where the person is with me because they really care about me, or are they with me because they need a place to stay? And I argue in the show notes, and I actually do personally believe this is a great thing. It is a great thing to be able to live in a time where people have the individual opportunity to create their own destiny. So if somebody wants to go out and work in a certain type of industry, they shouldn't be prohibited just because of their gender or their the ethnicity or color or whatever. They should be able to do that. But when you open it up and let everybody sort of get out there and sort of go for it, you have other people who say, I didn't want to do that anyway. I never would have wanted to have that job. All I wanted to do was find somebody awesome, and let them take care of me and provide for me. Okay, fine. The challenge though is it's not something where you can just look at somebody and assume based on gender or your perception of gender or whatever that that's the decision they're going to make, because everyone's an individual. So some people still are going to adhere to the idea they would love a provider. There is nothing that would make them happier than somebody else to provide economically everything, and then they can just be a nurturer, give them some attention, whatever romantic part of that might be part of that, and that makes them happy. But everybody now has to go out and sort of investigate individually and see if that's what you want. Fine, it still is available. You just can't assume though that it's going to be everybody of a certain gender that's going to fall into that group. You're going to have to spend the time individually, sort of talking to people and figuring out, is that what you want? You also have to do this though. Many people who are successful at work, quote unquote, have very poor self-image and self-confidence. And it seems maybe not logical, but it's a reality, right? And so if you don't have a good self-image, if you're not healthy in terms of how you treat yourself, if you're not someone who is constantly working on, your own personal growth, of being of service, of being kind to others, and if you just sort of want a person, a spouse, somebody there, just sort of like another thing, like a person as a commodity, that's kind of, and you think, well, look, I'll go get somebody that's, wherever I am in the world, the version or the vision of beauty or attractiveness or handsomeness or whatever, you can go do that. But if you do that, don't sit around and cry and complain that the people don't care about you, and when they did leave you, all they did was try to get money from you. Because, yes, that's why they're with you. That was the deal. The deal was that you're trying to trade your resources for their time and attention, and they'll do that. There's always someone who will, not always, but there's, at this point in our experience, there are people who still do that. But don't misunderstand and think that they love you and care about you and sit around crying and shocked and surprised when they left you or they cheated on you or they sued you for support, down the road. Of course they are. They never were here because they were caring about you or interested in you. It never was about you at all. It was about your stuff. And that's a fine deal to make if that's what makes you happy. But you would need to go into that deal confident, feeling good, understanding that's the trade, and then you will never be upset or hurt because you would know from the beginning they don't really care about me. They might say nice things to me because that's sort of their job, right? Is to be nurturing and say nice things to you because, that's what they do, right? They're a supporter. They'll support you and you provide. It doesn't mean it's real. It doesn't mean that they have genuine feelings for you. But that's okay because, that would have been the same situation, hundreds or thousands of years ago, if not more so, right? Just make the trade. But don't go into the trade with your eyes closed and then sit around and cry and tell your lawyer how mean and horrible the world is because the person, never cared about you. Of course they didn't care about you. That's why they were with you. That's why there was a huge discrepancy in age and in resources, right? And you picked them not because of their integrity, not because of their sensitivity, not because of any of that. You pick them because of usually they're just another commodity to you. Like you want the fanciest car, you'll go out and get the, quote, best looking whatever, type of person it is you're interested in. So you did that. So you got what you paid for. Now, you can't complain later because that was the whole analysis. If you are, what I encounter more frequently, a person who really does have that, which again is ingrained in us, for a long period of time, if not the majority of our experience as humans, that romantic love, right? That's the modern idea, right? I want a partner, right? So the man doesn't say, the male gender traditional wouldn't say, I want somebody by my side or behind me. They say, I want a partner. And in fact, we use that word in a lot of part of the world, right? For either same gender or opposite gender couples. That's my partner, because that's what it means. It doesn't mean they're behind me or beneath me or the side of me, that they're awesome and doing great things and I'm awesome doing great things. Maybe we're doing the same thing, maybe we're doing different things, but we're partners. We're sharing this together. We're sharing decisions. We're sharing the journey in life together. We're growing together. That's sort of a more, very modern, though. Very modern. So this isn't something that we've had a lot of time to adjust to as people. If you want that, then you're going to have to go out there and invest the time in being, first of all, the best version of yourself, the healthiest, most giving version of yourself, right? Because what do you have to offer? You can't just go out there and do that trade, right? Look at all my stuff. Look how successful I am in my job. No. When you want this romantic thing, then it's all the other stuff. What's your integrity? What are your core values? Are you somebody that's trustworthy? Are you somebody that's reliable? Do they admire and respect you? What's your sense of humor? What's your personal philosophy? I mean, this is all the stuff that you can offer, but it's deep. A, you have to go really deep inside yourself and share these things, and B, it's high risk because these are the sort of, deepest recesses of how you see yourself. And if you go out looking for that person based on the integrity, the humor, the all these intangible things that make somebody uniquely special, then the benefit, of course, will be and is that people who are in those types of relationships tend to have very high positive outcomes, emotional, psychological, romantic, physical, the whole, it's wonderful, right? Because both people are meeting their own needs, which is part one, and then they're trying to meet as much as they can, as healthfully as they can, with positive, open, ongoing communication, the other person's needs. And so that's something that many people in modern times aspire to. If you want that, though, then you have to go out there and put the work into yourself, because you're not going to be able to hide behind clothes or stuff or jewelry or cars or whatever. It's not going to work, right? You got to be really you. So how do you treat yourself? What are your goals? And then you're going to have to go out and spend time with other people. Really spend time with them. If you do that, though, the potential payoff, of course, will be that you will meet someone like yourself that you're looking for, who has integrity and similar values in some ways, but in other ways is really different and interesting and exciting, and that you can then create that mutually rewarding and supportive partnership where people stay together because they want to be together, not because they have to. And of course, it's romantic and it's beautiful. I'm tearing up talking about it. But I would argue if that's what you want, then you need to go ahead and put the effort into it. But it's not going to be something overnight, and it's not something where there's not going to be emotional risk, because you're going to be laying out there everything of the core values of who you are, and you're going to be spending time with other people to get to know who they are, and you're going to be spending this investment, emotional, psychological, with each other, where you grow together. And it's very risky, of course, but it's much less risky than denying yourself the opportunity for truly being loved based on who you are, and not just, again, your stuff or what you can do for somebody. So I really hope that at the end of this episode that it was helpful for you. So stop with all the stuff about, I don't understand, I'm single. Okay, well, fine, let's fix that then. And we just talked about how to do it. You're going to work on yourself, and you're going to go out and you're going to invest in other people. And you're going to do this until you are able to go ahead and meet the other people that are out there in the world just like you, right? And then be able to reach sort of that highest level of bonding and intimacy and sharing a life with someone. And I really thank you for joining me today. As always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information or to share your feedback.